Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday evening Parent Academy webinar session. Thank you for joining us. And again, we are excited to have you as audience listeners and participants. I am Tina Foston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist with the Educational Equity and Outreach for Alachua County Public Schools, and I want to welcome you this evening. Tonight, we will receive some helpful information from our guest speaker, Mr. Royce Kramer, and he'll be joining us from our very own Alachua County Public School Systems. So just before we get started, let's review some housekeeping elements. Please keep your microphones on mute throughout the duration of the presentation. We will be monitoring your questions and we will respond accordingly. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your webinar window. And please note that the Parent Academy webinars are closed captioned, recorded, and posted to our website for access for later review or for anyone who could not join us tonight live. Your questions will be answered at the conclusion of each session. If there is a specific need for a personal conversation, the Parent Academy email address is parentacademy@gm.sbac.edu. And we will get to those questions or your request for additional information forwarded to the correct Alachua County school personnel or community team member. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Royce.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to touch base with everybody. I'm glad you could participate here in tonight's webinar. Just to give you some background on me, I am a supervisor for student services. I work in student discipline and special ed. Work over at the Fern Science Center and have been there this year. Previously, I've been a principal in the district for the last 10 years and an administrator for the last 20. And this is my 28th year in Alachua County Schools. I guess you could say a homer to Alachua County Schools. I've been working it ever since I got out of college, and really love what I'm doing here in the district and working to improve the lives and help students be successful. So right now, what we're working on are three things in the student discipline. Number one, we are working with a group called Insights to Behavior. And what that group entails is that we're going out to schools, we're working with their student services teams, we're looking at specific data as to the number of referrals that schools have and what the big tipping points are for why those referrals are happening, bringing in some behavior intervention plans for students, and also making suggestions and giving schools and teachers some intervention programming to help them make those students get in the classroom and be as successful as they can. I think the large part of it is that the interventions that we're putting in place are all research-based. They're tried and true. And what we're trying to do also is educate our staff and teachers and our administrators on how to implement those structures for students, and to also make sure that we're doing everything we can to help make that student's time in those classrooms as successful as possible. The other thing that we're working on is what is called our BASE program. And for our students who are having issues in classes and schools, there's a program that we're using now that we assign to students specific to what the behaviors are. And they're required to complete that program, whether it be something that's assigned by the deans or administrators, or to if they're in school detention and any of the alternatives to suspension programs that we have. And then the third thing that we're working on, obviously, is our positive behavior system, or better known as our PBIS. We're working on collecting data through the system that is set up by the district, the ABC platform. And we're really looking at and targeting schools that have a high level of referrals. We're looking at some kind of positive behavior programming that we can put into schools to reduce the number of referrals and actually reduce and change some of the behaviors that we're seeing in some of the schools. So there's a lot that's going on here with us. But the big thing is make sure that we're out there as far as supporting schools, helping schools with their staff and teachers, support students. And like I said, the big thing for us as a support system is to make sure that anything that we have that we can bring into the schools to help modify and change behavior is our top priority. So I know I've said a lot here, so if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. I'll be happy to answer any questions or comments, take any comments or suggestions that you have.
So, Mr. Buddy, at this time, I don't see any questions, but can you tell me a little bit about the big poster that you have on the wall of our office? Could you give me a little bit of background to that and what that actually is?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've worked on changing here and going into the schools is our in-school detention program. For a long time, I think that it's been kind of a place where students go to do their work in lieu of suspension. And, the big part and I'd say maybe the big issue that we have with some of those things is that we don't do a lot to help students work on changing behavior. It really is a place where students can go and do their work as a timeout from things that are happening in the classroom. Like I said, we wanted to come in this year and revamp it. And the poster that we're referring to it's more of a restorative practice poster, and it shows how to actually work through that conversation and having conversations with kids and actually listening to kids and hearing what their problems are and how they feel things are going on in the classroom or in the school as a whole. We want to make sure that we're asking the right questions, but not only asking the right questions, listening to what the students have to say. I think that's very important for us moving forward, because in order for us to find out what supports and things that we need to bring in to help students, we need to listen to students. And I think bringing this program in for this restorative practice part of our ISD program is very important, because it gives us an opportunity in a small group setting to listen to students, hear what their concerns are, hear what their complaints are, and then come to some resolution as to how we can move forward and make sure that they have the right tools, that if they're asking for help, they're needing help, they're getting, and they know where to get that help from.
So with the children that you all are currently working with, have you seen much change, or have you seen any feedback from them with the tools that you're providing to them to see why are you, acting this way? What is going on? What has the feedback been?
Yeah, the feedback early on has been very positive in the schools that we've got this implemented in. Just to give you a background, we started this same program last year when I was a principal at Aquin Jones. And one of the things that we really wanted to put in place was student advocacy. In other words, a student has a problem, they, instead of being disrespectful or If it's the issues they have with peers, is the proper way to channel that, use their words instead of their fist or inappropriate conversations, and to teach them to how to advocate for themselves in the right way. One of the things I always say to kids, particularly when I was going through as an alternative school principal, was, what's a better way you could have handled this? And sometimes, you get that answer, I don't know. And it's not because they are trying to avoid the question, it's they actually don't have the proper tools to help navigate conversations and things that they perceive that are against them, or anything of that nature. So the big thing is self-advocacy. That's our priority, is to make sure that they're heard and that they have an ability to have a venue to vent or to say what they need. And so, like I said, moving forward, we want to make sure that students are heard, we meet their needs, and also we come up with a resolution and teach them how to actually navigate conflict, navigate things in their perception that they don't feel are right. And then also get them to see why we have rules and things established that's for their safety and for their well-being. So I know that's sometimes tough for a lot of kids, but coming into us being here for the post-pandemic, a lot of kids were out on their own. They were at home, and I know parents work, and my kids were at home as well. And the big thing, like I said, moving forward, is how do we get kids back to doing the basic skill things that they need, that are necessary to navigate through school, and further in the larger picture, navigate through life. And so how we talk to each other is a very important part of the kind of movement that we're doing now, particularly in our ISD rooms, is because we want to make sure that if that student is in that classroom, in that ISD classroom, that we're doing and taking advantage of every minute we can to help them navigate not only the behavior that got them in there, but also listening to them and hearing that they make sure that they're having a voice, and then also flipping around and making sure that they advocate for themselves, what they need, what they want, what they desire, what do they want to see out of their school. And so I think those are all important points to make sure that students understand that we're really here for them. And sometimes it's hard for them to see that, because particularly a student who seems to get in trouble quite a bit, it's hard for them to even see that people care about that, because what they're seeing a lot of times is a negative side of it. They're in trouble, they get a consequence. They may get in-school suspension or in-school detention, or maybe even suspended out of school. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the things that we put in place not only reduce the suspensions, because suspensions, let's be perfectly honest, they don't solve the problem of what the students are having. They don't change the behavior. So I think moving forward, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a school to make sure that they have an opportunity to learn and to use their voice for a positive outcome, and to make sure that they're changing the behavior, but not only changing the behavior, but learning how to make sure that that doesn't happen again and they don't make the same mistakes over and over again.
Thank you. I do have another question. So with the positive behavior system, are we only giving our students that opportunity to kind of be introduced to it when they get to ISD? Or is the school like sitting them down to say, okay, this is the new system that we're implementing, and can you kind of tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the positive behavior system is really, it encompasses a lot of different aspects. Number one, when you go to your student's school, you probably see posters. They probably have some, like when I was at Howard Bishop, it was SOAR. And part of that acronym was, students are safe, they're on task, they're advocates for themselves, and they're responsible. So SOAR, when you break that down, that's what that stands for. So when you go to schools and you see those posters that are running around, that's part of their PBIS program. And what they do is that they teach that to their kids day in, day out, whether it be on the morning announcements or closing in the day of the afternoon announcements. It's posted in teachers' classrooms, and you'll hear that stuff go around all the time. And as a PBIS supervisor, I go around to schools and I'll just walk in the hallways and we'll look for the posters and some of the things that are set up to know that are a PBIS school. And the good part is I get to ask students, well, what does that stand for? What does SOAR stand for? And if students can repeat that to me, I know that that's going through the school, that's being taught to the students day in and day out. They have opportunities to see it on a daily basis, and they get to hear it through different media, whether it be morning announcements, afternoon announcements, or in the classrooms. Now, that's just one component of the PBIS. The other component is we're tracking discipline data, and some of the goals that we have, particularly with Florida MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. One of the goals that we have is that we want to make sure that in any school, 80% of the students that are in that school have 0 to 1 referrals. And so the goal is it's a large goal, and it's one of those things that we're really working towards getting to. But if you have a school that has 80% of the students have 0 to 1 referrals, you're a tier 1 level. And you've met the tier 1 level goals according to the MTSS system. On the tier 3, what we'd really like to see is any student who we'd like to see about 8% of the students that have more than 5 referrals. And once we take a look at that, one of the things that we're definitely working on doing is that once a student hits like 4 to 5 referrals, we're going to have maybe we'll call for a meeting with the parent, come in, let's look at the data, see what kind of issues that the student's having, and then put together a behavior intervention plan or put some structures in place or strategies to help that student get turned around, whether it be restorative practices, if they're having peer issues, some peer mediation, if they're having conflict with the people in the class or maybe the adults. How can we help that student navigate that and advocate for themselves and build that relationship with the teachers that are necessary for them to be successful? And then the third component of it is that, we have a reward system, a token system. A lot of them, you've probably seen some of these things where, when I was a principal at Sidney Lanier, we had what we called Lanier Loot. There were little dollars with our school logo on there, and the students could earn those in the classrooms if they were doing really good things. And then every Friday they would be able to take their Lanier Loot and come down to the school store, and they would be able to turn in their cash Lanier Loot for tokens and different things in the school store. And we were fortunate to have a couple of churches that helped us stock the school store and make sure that every student who had the opportunity to spend cash, this school store was well stocked every Friday to make sure they could spend their Lanier Loot in that. So PBIS came about I'd say it's about 15 years ago now, give or take. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just focusing on negative discipline, but that we were also making sure that we recognized students who came to school every day, who did the right thing, and make sure that they were recognized as well, instead of focusing on just the negative parts of the discipline program. Once this PBIS started to take place in these schools, then a lot of our kids who saw other students being rewarded for their positive behavior, they started to exhibit positive behavior because they wanted to earn tokens. They wanted to go on field trips. They wanted to be part of the programming that we were doing. And the school, anywhere from school store to, and here's one of my favorites is, I got to know some of the people at Gator Domino's, and at the schools where I was principal, we had pizza with the principal on Fridays, and Domino's would donate pizzas to us every Friday. And we would do that. We would have students of the week, and they would come in and they would have pizza with me, or the principal. And it was another way to reward students. And we just have conversations. It wasn't anything about school. It wasn't about, it was, about things that are going on, just having good conversations, good relationship building conversations. How are you doing? How's your family? It wasn't anything that we were pushing or trying to force. It was just a natural thing. You'd have lunch, just like anybody else who's having lunch with a friend or something to that effect. You just have those conversations and you get to know each other. And I think part of my success being as a principal was building those relationships, those positive relationships with those students, because and I'll just be perfectly honest with you, if a student's having a problem and they don't feel like they can come to you, they won't. And if you have that positive relationship with that student and they're having issues or something's going on and they're going to give you a heads up of what's going on, once they know that you'll go to bat or go to the wall for them, they'll come and see you. And to be perfectly honest, until you can get to that point, it's a struggle, because kids will come in and they'll do their thing and then they'll go home, and then you don't really see them unless something negative happens. So I was always a person who was proactive, want to get to know the kids. I want to get to know my kids, make sure that everything I can possibly do as a principal and help support those students and have my faculty and staff in that same mindset. That's what I always work to do. And to be honest with me, working the last 4 schools, we've been able to do a lot of positive and great things in those schools and really turn the climate around and make sure that kids appreciated coming to school. They like their school, and that, we made it as a best and the most successful experience as we could for a good number of our kids.
Wonderful. Thank you. Follow-up question to that. How can parents help reinforce this program at home to help their students kind of get it not only at school, but also at home? So that way we know that they're getting it all the way around.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first I would say to go to your school, be part of your PTA or your school advisory committee. Those are parents who come into those schools and they know exactly what's going on. All the data and the information that's going on in the school is shared with those 2 groups. There's obviously some fundraisers, particularly with the PTO, they're an invaluable piece to what's going on in each and every school. The larger the PTA, the more things you're obviously able to do. But to follow up to the second part of that question is, what can parents do? Involvement in the school is a priority. It really is necessary for it to happen. But the second part is that have those conversations with your principal, with your administration team. Have those conversations with the teachers that your students are assigned to, and then you can also go to the pbis.org website, which is run through the University of South Florida, and there's a parent portal to that where you can work on some of those positive things that we do in the schools, in the school settings, that you can actually do at home and emulate that and kind of shadow that what's happening at the schools. So there is a lot of information out there, and my suggestion to you is to go ahead and talk with your school administrators, your principal, talk with the teachers, talk with your deans, and just get on that good relationship, because I think there's a lot of things that can happen when you're having positive relationships. And when students struggle and they're having issues, it's those conversations and the communication is very, very important to help foster that relationship, number one, but also to help the student figure out how to navigate those things, and then and have a positive end result.
Wonderful. And if I have any parents that reach out to me to ask about this poster that you and I spoke of, is there a way for you to send that to me, or let us know how they can navigate
Absolutely
to get that?
Yes, I have that. I can certainly send that to you through email. Some of those restorative practice posters. And now the one that we're talking about is one that is kind of a homemade one that I did myself. But there are a number of those types of setups, and then certainly can send that to you. And if any parents request that, then we can certainly send it to you through email.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so I will open up the floor again because I've had a lot of questions for you to see if any of our audience listeners would like to ask a question. And again, if you guys have questions, please type it in the Q&A section. It's at the bottom of your webinar window. And Mr. Buddy, and I'm sorry, I call you Mr. Buddy. How successful has it been to have the ISD there at Fernside here lately? Because I see the kids kind of trickle in. Has it grown, or do you see it kind of decreasing from when you guys first started the ISD there?
No, that's a great question. So what you're referring to is the Alternative Learning Center, which is essentially another version of ISD, but it's in lieu of suspension. So the difference is that in a regular school setting, ISD could be a detention for a number of things that are non-suspensions. ALC, the Alternative Learning Center, is directly an alternative to suspension. So for example, a couple kids get in a fight at a certain middle school, and we don't want to suspend them. We want to give the parents an opportunity to not have the students at home for 3 to 5 days or whatever the suspension was. They can opt for the ALC option, and then they would come to the ALC from however many days that the suspension was initially written for, and they can come in and they do the restorative practices. We ask those questions. We do our base training, so specific to the infraction. So in other words, if a student comes in and they're there for fighting, that base training will be based on what they got sent to ALC for. So if it's fighting, they'll do modules on fighting and conflict resolution and how to better navigate through conflict with peers. If it's defiance, then they would definitely do a module or two on defiance, and once again how to advocate for yourselves and navigate that process. And then once those are complete, then they move into the schoolwork that the school sends to ALC. That way they can still do the work that they would have normally gotten in school and not get behind academically. And at the end of the day, they close out with another restorative session, and they just talk about the day. They talk about why they are there, and then what they're going to do differently the next time to keep, if this situation presents itself. Which, because let's be honest, we're working with people, and sometimes we do have conflict in a lot of instances. But the real key is making sure that we teach them how to navigate that way they don't return to the ALC or the dean's office to potentially get suspended the next time. So yeah, like I said, so the second part of that question I want to follow up is that we started back in the middle of January. We've had a steady number of kids come. We do cap it at 10 students per day, and we've had on average about 6 to 7 kids per day. So the numbers are picking up. And more schools are starting to utilize the ALC. I could say on the last number of students, I think we were at, since January, the middle of January started, I think we're at 22 kids, and we've also we've kept suspension days or saved suspension days. I think we're at like 36 or 37 days that they're not have been on suspension. So yeah, I like where we're going. I think more and more parents are starting to utilize that ALC. And obviously the problem is that we don't have transportation to it. The parents have to actually transport students to and from. So that's at times or many times can be problematic, but I think that, we're getting students from a lot of different middle schools. So it's not exclusive to just the middle schools that are as close proximity wise. We're getting them from across town too. But like I said, the big thing is the number of students is starting to pick up, and it's really a positive thing because they're coming in and they're working on themselves. And I think that's the main, the most important thing that we're doing in ALC is that we're actually getting students to recognize why they're there and what they can do to prevent them from coming back.
So I guess once they go there, Mr. Buddy, and go through all of these stages to figure out why I did what I did, why I'm here, what are better ways that I can navigate the next time. Do you get points taken off? Because I'm not sure how that all works. If you fight, that may be, or a referral might be a point. If you fight, that might be 2 or 3 points. So do you have a system to where when they go and take these courses, that some of those points can be taken away because you've now completed some strategies to help you along the way?
Yeah, I think that there's not a specific point system, but what can happen is let's say a student gets in a fight and gets 5 days suspension. So one of the incentives that we have built into the ALC is that if they come in there and they're productive, they're engaged, they're working on helping themselves, learning the process, what can end up happening is that 5 day stretch can be reduced to 4 or maybe even 3, depending upon how well they do. So instead of a student being out of school for 5 days, they go to the ALC for 5 days, but that can be reduced according to the ALC supervisor teacher, and then we can send those kids back. And we've done that a couple times. Some students have come in and really, really worked on themselves. And then some of the students are struggling a little bit, and it's new. We're still trying to, work the kinks out, so to say. But because we haven't really had the ALC since before the pandemic started and kids were put out of school. So getting that back in the groove, so to speak, we're working those things out. But I know the team that I have back there are really, really good. And some of the students are going back to their schools and they're actually telling their administrative teams that, they picked up a lot, they learned a lot at ALC. So I think, engaging students, making sure that they're working on themselves, self-advocacy is a big important component to that. And then actually, making sure that they got their work so they're not behind academically too. So it's kind of an all-encompassing type of thing. But, it's just like anything else. If the students have behavior issues, academics is going to take a second seat to that. And so the more we can do interventions and get kids turned around, the more focus they can put on the academic component of what they're there to do. And then long term, we're looking at how those students can be successful in the long term.
Awesome. And then can you tell me if you've had students that have come to you that were in an altercation like together to see how they work through that, being in the same room and working on themselves? And I don't know, do they share what they're learning throughout those modules, or is it just a self-paced self-reflection, or do you allow them to talk about kind of like a mediation almost?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, so definitely. Matter of fact, the last 2 weeks we've had 4 students, 2 each from different schools who were in an altercation, came to the ALC, And I know some people are like, why would you put kids that have been fighting back in the same room? Well, I think the big part is to have those conversations in a safe environment where they can have an opportunity to voice what is going on. Sometimes it can be that it's just two people that just don't get along. Sometimes it's social media, where somebody said something in a text message or put something on social media, and the students have taken it out of context, or maybe it wasn't the right context. But regardless of that, we want to make sure that we have kids sit down with no outside interruptions and make sure that they can have those conversations. Why did you get in a fight? What was the triggers for this fight? And then sometimes you find out more than you bargained for, because they start to have those conversations and they talk about, well, we fought because someone else said something about us, and trying to instigate a fight between the two of us. And so the question is always, why would we let that happen? And sometimes we're so caught up in kids, especially because of the emotional component to it, they're caught up in the emotional part of it, and then they don't give themselves time to think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So coming in and talking about those things, having that open communication, doing peer mediation. A lot of kids come to find out they don't really have a problem with each other. It's some outside influence that's caused that. And so that's one thing, like I said, we can help kids navigate. And then if they're having a problem with somebody and they're comfortable with going to their principal or somebody on the staff and saying, hey, I'm having trouble with somebody, so-and-so. The next time, instead of getting suspended and possibly going to ALC or being home for 5 days, they could go to adult, advocate for themselves. That counselor or assistant principal or whoever, a dean, whoever's dealing with them, can call peer mediation, and they can do the same exact thing that we did at ALC, but do it at the school where they can work it out. And then it never becomes an issue. It never becomes something a part of their record. They're not suspended, or they're not an ALC. So the upside to all this is that we get kids to learn. We teach them math, we teach them science, we teach them language arts, we teach them social studies and other things. And, I think a big component of what we're doing is we got to teach them how to get along with one another, how to use their voice and be heard. So that's what we're really shifting to, is making sure that students are heard and that they have an avenue and an advocate who can listen to them and not judge, and then help them navigate through some of the crises or turmoil that's going on in schools.
Wonderful. So if once a parent decides to send their kids there versus at-home suspension, are they educated on what this program is and what the process is? And I think I'm only asking that question because I think it's very, very important that us as parents, because I have 3 kids myself, but I think it's very important for us as parents to know how to navigate. Let me see how you are helping my child move forward and work through some of these issues, because 9 times out of 10, they probably been in trouble more than this one time.
Right.
And so what are you doing to help them make a better decision, so that myself as a parent can reinforce that when they come home each day?
Right.
Because social media doesn't stop. The cattiness between kids don't stop. It's it's a forever presence, because that's just kids.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic question as well. So I think, what we're starting to put in place now is giving parents information. Obviously, for the ALC, when you're making that choice, the school has a itinerary of what the ALC looks like. We don't allow, students can bring phones, but they can't have phones in the classroom. They have to turn them in and to the ALC supervisor or teacher. And then, so that's a distraction that's out of the way. And then, of course, going back to the structure of the ALC, starting with the restorative conversations, doing the base training, academics, and then finishing the day out with a positive affirmation of, how you did that day and things of that nature. I think one of the big things that we for parents, as part of your question, is that we offer, if a parent requests it, or maybe we just put the information out, we do have what we call a system of care. So there are outside agencies that are free to any parent who wants them. Ms. Vita Carter is the director of the system of care. And if you're familiar with her, then you know she's at the Fernside Center. She's right across the hallway from me. And we do refer kids, and particularly if parents request those things, and if they're having issues or they're having problems with different types of things, there's a lot of community service organizations out there who will be more than glad to contact and help you. So we do offer those type of services as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will check our Q&A again to see if we have any questions. I do not see any for us, but if any of my audience or participants would like to have Ms. Vita Carter's phone number and or email address, please send myself an email, and I will make sure that you have that contact information provided to you. Could you also provide your email address and contact information in case any of the audience listeners or participants would like to contact you?
Yes, I'm going to put that in the chat right now.
Okay. And that is Kramer RG. So KAMMANRG. And I'll say that again, KAMMANRG at gm.sbac.edu. Awesome. And I keep calling you Mr. Buddy, but I will say Royce. So that way.
No, it's fine. I answer to all of it. It's not a problem.
Yes. So if you all need to get in touch with him, that is his contact information. And you're definitely welcome to contact myself. And I'll make sure that he gets whatever questions that you may think of at a later time. And so I'll check the Q&A again to see if we have any questions. And if not, we'll go ahead and close out for this evening. Okay, I don't see any. So I'll go ahead and close. So thank you all again for joining us on tonight's Zoom. We appreciate your participation, and each week you are available to connect with us for more informative presentations and discussions. Once again, I am Tina Folston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for Educational Equity and Outreach for the Alachua County Public Schools. Next week, we will be on spring break, so we will join you all again here the following week, and it will be with the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office, and they're going to teach us some information about some healthier snacks for our kids and provide you some information just to get a little bit healthier. So again, I am Tina Folston Hayes. You can reach me if need be at the Parent Academy at gm.sbac.edu. And you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Mr. Buddy. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. It was very happy to do it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.